Shadow work. What is it and how do we face it? I didn't know when I was younger, I was perpetually running from facing my shadows when I was chasing drinks, drugs, women, constantly trying to escape this feeling I had inside of me that I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel good in my body. And so I reacted by trying to run away from it. And that only works so long. I do know people that are 80 years old and they're still running from their shadow, perpetually distracting themselves all day, every day, so that they don't face their shadows. And that's totally fine. You're just gonna have to continue on with that work in your next life. As my perception, that is how I see things. All the things we don't face, we eventually face over lifetimes. So what is shadow work? Shadow work on the psychological side of things, Carl Jung actually coined the term, and he was talking about all the aspects of yourself that you don't want to see, you don't want to acknowledge. They're still there, but kind of like your shadow, it follows you around whenever the sun is out. And on the spiritual side of things, the shadow is more the multiple lifetimes, like I just referenced, clearing multiple lifetimes of work, and then moving on to the collective. We have to clear the collective karma of our shadows and acknowledge the parts that we don't want to see. So shadow work gets deep, gets very deep. We can inherit our shadows from generational trauma, ancestral trauma, cultural trauma, and our personal lives. So it's all the things that can happen to us that we shove down into our body, and our body holds on to it, and eventually it comes out in different ways when we consciously let it release. And why do we need to do shadow work? I think of shadow work, imagine a light bulb in a room covered with a bunch of dirt and mud and grime and just gunk. So there's a light covered in gunk, and you turn on the switch, the light turns on, and there's barely any light coming through. It's all blocked. And so when we do shadow work, we go into that gunk and we consciously clear it away. And it's really through allowing, accepting, and embracing this gunk that we clear it and we integrate it, hence the awaken, integrate, and embody. So when we integrate it, we see how the shadows come up in our day-to-day lives, and we can choose to respond rather than react to them, and we can choose to acknowledge it, move through it, sit with it, but choose to move a different way, to act a different way, to be a different frequency. It all comes down to frequency and energy, right? Ask Nikola Tesla. So we change our frequency, change our reality. Change what we frequently see, change our frequency. When we start seeing it as a gift, there's actually a gift hidden in the shadow, and we just have to go into that shadow and let it out so that we can move through it and offer our gifts to the world. One of my shadows that I had to work through, and I'm still currently working through, is the shadow of being seen. I was taught as a kid I had to be small, I had to be invisible to be safe, and so this gets ingrained over years and years of this way of thinking that you can't speak up for yourself, you can't have a voice, you can't be seen, you can't express yourself. All these things get ingrained into you, ingrained into me Maybe you have the same shadow, who knows? A lot of us carry that one. And so I had to acknowledge that. I had to be friends with that, really. I had to let myself feel the fear and still know that, all right, I know this is a shadow and I'm going to choose to do the uncomfortable thing and grow. This is what Earth Garden is all about. Earth Soul Garden. We grow our soul by moving into these uncomfortable spaces, by moving into the unknown. And it's scary and it's new, and much like when a snake sheds its skin, it has to shed the old. You have to let go of your old self to grow into this new version of you. And this new version, like the snake, it's going to be tender, and you're going to have to be gentle with yourself. You're going to have to kind of move in the world a little bit different. You're not going to have that thick skin yet. You're going to almost, sometimes we cocoon for a while. We kind of withdraw from the world and let our new selves grow and develop and get a thicker skin, because we're real tender going through it. I know when I've gone through a lot of my transformations, there's a while where I just kind of hide, and it's because I'm in such a transition. It's so confusing, and I eventually learned that confusion is a great shadow to lean into. Confusion means that what worked for you in the past isn't working for you where you're at or where you're going. And you're confused because what used to work doesn't work anymore. And our mind doesn't comprehend this new way of being. The mind is great at solving problems it already knows, but it's not great at going into the unknown. It's designed to protect us. It's designed to keep us safe. And so to be safe, the mind thinks we have to stay stuck in our old patterns. We have to stay how we used to be, because going out into the world and doing new things is dangerous to our mind. It doesn't know what's going on. So all these different layers of shadow work comes up when we're on the spiritual path. It's just part of the growth. And eventually we realize why it's there and why we need to integrate these shadows. And then it's kind of funny, you can see it on other people, especially once you have dealt with it or begin dealing with it in your life. I've noticed this. I can instantly spot when someone is trying to hide or trying to act small, because I've been there. I know what it's like to not want to be seen. And then I also know what it's like to work through that and come out on the other side and have a bunch of people see you, and you get the rewards of that. You get to offer your gifts to these people. And then that's when your adventure unfolds. Otherwise, you just stay kind of stuck and hidden. One of the coolest systems I've found for understanding your shadows is the gene keys. When I work with people, I often get their gene keys, which is based on when you're born, astrological impacts, because when you're born, the energy of all the stars and where you're at on the planet crystallizes to form who you are, and we choose this as our lessons. And in the profile, it isn't the end-all be-all, but I use it as a rough framework of how to approach shadows. Because once we can get through our shadows, like I said, then we really begin to shine. We begin to put ourselves out there. We create the reality that we're drawn to. rather than being a victim of our story and a victim of the circumstance that we find ourselves in. We totally change our frequency and get this new energy and put it out there for people. Because it's not really about you, it's about all of us. If you are the only person with food in a starving village, you're not going to feel very good. But if you can share that with all the people, you have a sense of community, you have a sense of belonging, and you also know that you helped other people, all the things. So it is important to do the shadow work, not just for you, but for all of us. We all need you to do the work to shine your gifts and be who you came here to be. So with that, ciao, much love.